Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
What would you do if, after many years of silence, distance, and completely separate lives, you suddenly saw your twin flame again? Not in a dream, not in a memory, but standing right there in front of you. Imagine walking into a place you have visited 1,000 times before. A cafe, a bookstore, a quiet street you pass every day. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, just another ordinary moment in an ordinary day. And then, in the middle of that ordinary moment, something shifts. Your eyes meet someone across the room. For a split second, time seems to hesitate. You feel it before your mind even understands what is happening. A strange familiarity rises inside your chest. Your heart reacts first. Your body remembers before your thoughts catch up. And suddenly you realize who it is. It's them, your twin flame. The person you once believed would always be part of your life until life pulled you in completely different directions. Years may have passed. Maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe even longer. Entire chapters of life happened in between. Careers were built. Hearts were broken and healed. Dreams changed. People changed. And yet, in that quiet moment when your eyes meet again, something deeply familiar awakens. Not the chaos, not the pain, but the recognition. It feels strangely calm, almost like seeing someone you just spoke to yesterday. How is that possible? How can someone disappear from your life for so many years, and yet the connection still feels so immediate? This is one of the most mysterious experiences people describe when they reconnect with their twin flame after a long separation. There is often no dramatic explosion of emotion. Instead, there is something much more powerful. A quiet certainty. It is not the kind of recognition that happens through logic. Your mind might still be confused. Your mind might be saying, "Wait, is that really them?" But somewhere deeper inside you, there is no doubt at all. Your soul already knows. And that is the strange paradox of twin flame reunions. Even when time has built entire worlds between two people, the sense of familiarity can still remain untouched. But here is the interesting part. When people imagine meeting their twin flame again after many years, they often expect intense emotions to return immediately. They imagine overwhelming passion, old wounds reopening, memories rushing back all at once. Yet for many people, the first feeling is actually something much quieter. Peace. There is a subtle feeling of coming home to a place that once felt lost. Think about how it feels when you return to a childhood home after many years away. The furniture might be different. The walls might have been repainted. But something in the atmosphere still feels familiar. Your body remembers the space. In the same way, when twin flames meet again after a long period of separation, their souls often recognize each other instantly, even if their lives have changed completely. The person standing in front of you may not look exactly the same as before. They may have new experiences written across their face. Their voice might sound calmer. Their presence might feel different. But beneath all those surface changes, something essential remains exactly the same. That deep energetic signature. The one that once created an almost unexplainable bond between you. And when that energy appears again, your inner world reacts in a way that words cannot easily describe. Some people say it feels like a quiet electric current passing through the air. Others describe it as a sense of magnetic pull, as if something invisible is gently drawing two people toward each other again. But perhaps the most surprising part of this moment is not the familiarity. It is the absence of fear. Years ago, when you first encountered your twin flame, the connection might have felt overwhelming. Twin flame relationships are often intense. They mirror your deepest wounds. They trigger your fears of abandonment, rejection, and vulnerability. Sometimes that intensity becomes too much. One person runs, the other chases, and eventually, life forces separation. Not because the connection was fake, but because both people needed time to grow on their own. Time to face parts of themselves that the relationship had revealed. So when you meet again after years of personal growth, the emotional atmosphere often feels very different. The tension that once existed may no longer be there. Instead of emotional storms, there is stillness. Instead of confusion, there is curiosity. You may find yourself looking at them and wondering, how did we both change so much and yet somehow remain connected? And perhaps the most intriguing question is this: did the connection survive the distance? Or did the distance actually deepen it? Because sometimes separation does something unexpected. It removes the noise. It removes the expectations. It removes the constant emotional reactions that once made the relationship difficult. And in that silence, both souls begin to evolve separately. Without realizing it, both people start becoming the versions of themselves they were always meant to be. That is why when twin flames meet again after many years, the connection often feels different. Not weaker, but deeper. Not chaotic, but grounded. It is no longer fueled by urgency or emotional dependency. Instead, it feels like two people who finally understand themselves. Two people who no longer need the other person to complete them. And, ironically, that is often the moment when the connection becomes stronger than ever. But let us pause for a moment and ask something important. What if the true purpose of twin flame separation was never about losing each other? What if it was about learning how to become whole on your own first? Because when two incomplete people try to build a life together, their wounds often collide. But when two people spend years growing separately, something remarkable can happen. They return not as the same people who once struggled. They return as two individuals who have learned how to stand on their own. And when those two versions finally meet again, the connection is no longer about filling emptiness. It becomes something entirely different. A meeting of two souls who have both changed, but somehow still recognize each other instantly. And that is where the real story begins. Because the moment of reunion is only the first step. The real question is not simply, what does it feel like to see your twin flame again after many years? The real question is this: what happens next when two souls who once separated finally stand face to face again, both transformed by time? That is the journey we are about to explore. When people first learn about the idea of twin flames, they often imagine a story that looks like a fairy tale.
Two souls meet.
They recognize each other instantly. They fall into a deep connection that feels almost magical. And from that moment forward, they stay together forever. But anyone who has truly experienced a twin flame connection knows that the reality is often very different. In fact, one of the most common stages of the twin flame journey is separation. And sometimes that separation does not last a few weeks or months. Sometimes it lasts years, 5 years, 10 years, even decades. At first, this can feel incredibly confusing. If two people are meant to share such a deep spiritual connection, why would life pull them apart for so long? Why would something that feels so powerful end in silence and distance? These are questions that many people ask themselves during the separation phase. But the deeper you explore the nature of this journey, the more you begin to understand something important. Separation is not the failure of the connection. In many cases, it is part of the process that allows the connection to evolve. To understand why this happens, we have to look at what a twin flame connection really does to a person. When two twin flames first meet, something unusual often occurs. The connection acts like a mirror. Not just a mirror for love, attraction, and compatibility, but a mirror for everything hidden beneath the surface. Every insecurity, every unresolved wound, every fear that has been quietly living in the subconscious. Imagine looking into a mirror that does not just reflect your face, but also reflects your deepest emotional patterns. That is often what a twin flame relationship feels like. At the beginning, the connection can feel euphoric. People describe it as if they have finally met someone who truly understands them on every level. Conversations flow naturally. There is an almost telepathic sense of knowing what the other person is feeling. It can feel like meeting someone you have known forever. But that initial harmony rarely stays perfect for long. Because once the emotional bond deepens, the mirror begins to reveal more difficult things. One person may start feeling afraid of losing the other. Another person may begin feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of the connection. Old wounds from childhood may suddenly resurface. Patterns of abandonment, trust issues, or fear of vulnerability can all begin to appear. And this is the moment when many twin flame relationships enter what people often call the runner and chaser phase. One person begins to pull away. The other feels the loss and tries to hold the connection together. From the outside, it may look like a normal relationship conflict. But on the inside, something much deeper is happening. Both people are being confronted with parts of themselves they may have avoided for years. For some, this experience feels too intense. The emotional exposure becomes overwhelming, and the natural instinct is to create distance. Not necessarily because the love is gone, but because the inner transformation feels too heavy to handle at that moment. This is why separation often happens. Not as a punishment, not because the connection was an illusion, but because both individuals still have personal growth that must happen independently. Think of it like two seeds planted in the same soil. If they grow too close together too quickly, their roots may become tangled. They may compete for the same space, the same light, the same resources. But if they are given time to grow separately, each tree develops strong roots on its own. And only then can they stand side by side without collapsing into each other. Twin flame separation works in a similar way. During the years apart, both people go through experiences that shape who they become. They meet new people. They face challenges. They discover strengths they never knew they had. Some focus on building careers. Some travel and explore the world. Others go through emotional healing that they might never have confronted if the relationship had continued in the same intense way. Sometimes life brings relationships with other partners. These experiences are not necessarily mistakes. They are often part of the process of understanding love, boundaries, and personal identity. Because one of the most important lessons many people learn during the separation phase is this: learning how to be complete on your own. Before the separation, the connection might have felt like everything. It may have felt like the other person held the key to happiness, purpose, or emotional stability. But life has a way of slowly teaching a different lesson. You begin to realize that your identity cannot depend on another person. Your happiness cannot be built entirely on whether someone stays or leaves. True emotional maturity begins when you learn how to stand fully in your own life. When you learn to build peace inside yourself, regardless of external circumstances. For some people, this realization takes years. Because growth rarely happens overnight. Sometimes it happens through difficult experiences, through heartbreak, through moments of loneliness, through facing fears that were once hidden beneath the surface. But over time, something begins to shift. The intense longing that once dominated your thoughts slowly becomes quieter. You begin focusing more on your own life path. You develop passions. You discover new aspects of yourself. And without even realizing it, the person you once were begins to change. Interestingly, the same transformation is often happening on the other side as well. While you are evolving in your own world, your twin flame is likely going through their own series of lessons and awakenings. Even if you have no contact, even if you have no idea what they're doing, life is quietly shaping both individuals into more stable, self-aware versions of themselves. That is why, when twin flames meet again after many years, something feels different. The emotional turbulence that once existed may have softened. The fear of losing each other may no longer dominate the connection. Both people have learned how to live independently. Both have faced life without relying on the relationship to define their identity. And that independence creates a new foundation for connection. Instead of two people trying to complete each other, it becomes two whole individuals choosing to walk together. But this raises an important question. If separation is such a common part of the twin flame journey, does that mean reunion is inevitable? The truth is more complex. Some twin flames do reunite later in life. Others never reconnect physically, but still experience profound personal growth from the encounter. Because ultimately, the purpose of the journey is not simply to end up together. The deeper purpose is transformation. The connection pushes both individuals to evolve emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. Sometimes reunion becomes possible once that growth has occurred. And sometimes the greatest gift of the connection was the transformation itself. But when reunion does happen after many years, it often carries a very different energy from the beginning of the story. The intensity is still there. The recognition is still there. But something new appears alongside it. Wisdom, patience, emotional stability. And that is when the connection has the chance to become something it could never have been in the past. Not just an intense relationship, but a conscious partnership between two people who have both learned who they truly are. And that is when the next phase of the journey begins. Because when twin flames meet again after years of separation, the most fascinating discovery is not just that the connection still exists. It is realizing how much both souls have changed during the time apart. When twin flames separate, the silence that follows can feel almost unbearable. At the beginning, the absence is loud. You may replay conversations in your mind. You may wonder what went wrong. You may ask yourself endless questions that seem to have no answers. Why did this happen? Did they ever truly care? Will we ever see each other again? During the first phase of separation, the emotional intensity of the connection does not simply disappear. In fact, it often becomes stronger in a different way. Without the physical presence of the other person, the mind begins to fill the empty space with memories, imagination, and longing. Everything reminds you of them. A song on the radio, a place you once visited together. Even certain words or phrases can suddenly trigger an entire flood of emotions. At times it may feel as if the connection is haunting you. And this is one of the most difficult stages of the journey. Because when a relationship ends in ordinary circumstances, people usually find closure through clear reasons. Maybe the personalities were incompatible. Maybe the life goals were different. But twin flame separation rarely offers such simple explanations. The connection often ends while the emotional bond is still incredibly strong. This creates a strange paradox. The relationship may be gone, but the connection still feels alive. Many people spend months or even years trying to understand what happened during this stage. They analyze every detail of the past, hoping that if they think about it long enough, the meaning will finally become clear. But eventually something begins to change. Not because all the questions have been answered, but because life continues moving forward. Responsibilities call. Work demands attention. Friends and family need your presence. Little by little, the focus of your daily life begins shifting away from the past. You start rebuilding routines that do not revolve around the connection anymore. At first, this process can feel almost like betrayal. A part of you may resist moving forward. You might feel that letting go of the pain means letting go of the love as well. But as time passes, something surprising begins to happen. You realize that growth does not erase the connection. Instead, it slowly transforms the way you relate to it. The memories that once caused intense emotional reactions begin to soften. The longing that once felt overwhelming becomes quieter. And eventually, you start discovering parts of yourself that had nothing to do with the relationship at all. You rediscover independence. Perhaps you begin exploring passions you had forgotten. Maybe you dive deeply into your career or creative pursuits. Some people travel to places they had never imagined visiting before. Others invest time in learning new skills or pursuing education. Life gradually expands again. And with that expansion comes something important: perspective. Distance allows you to see things that were impossible to recognize while you were still inside the relationship. For example, you may start realizing patterns that existed between you and your twin flame. Moments when fear shaped your reactions. Times when emotional wounds influenced the way you communicated. You may recognize how much both of you were still learning about yourselves at the time. And instead of blaming the other person for everything that went wrong, a more balanced understanding begins to emerge. Both people were growing. Both people were struggling with their own internal battles. And perhaps neither of you had the emotional tools required to handle such an intense connection at that stage of life. This realization can bring a surprising sense of peace, because it removes the need to hold onto resentment. It replaces the narrative of someone ruined everything with a more compassionate understanding. Two people met at a time when they were still evolving. The connection revealed deep truths about both of them. And then life created distance so that those truths could be explored individually. Meanwhile, something similar is often happening in the life of your twin flame as well. Even though you may have no direct contact, they are living their own story. They are facing challenges you may never see. They are learning lessons that shape who they become. They may go through relationships that teach them about commitment, communication, or emotional responsibility. They may confront fears they once avoided. They may experience successes and failures that reshape their worldview. In other words, life is quietly transforming them just as it is transforming you. But because you are no longer sharing daily life together, these changes happen in parallel rather than side by side. This is why, when many twin flames eventually cross paths again years later, the encounter can feel so surprising. You are not meeting the same person you once knew. You are meeting the person they became after years of independent growth. Their priorities may have changed. Their perspective on life may be deeper. The way they communicate may feel more grounded. And the same is true for you. You are no longer the person who once reacted with the same fears, expectations, or emotional patterns. The years apart have quietly reshaped both individuals. But perhaps the most important transformation during this period is internal. During separation, many people begin a deeper journey of self-discovery. They ask questions that they may never have asked before. Who am I outside of relationships? What truly makes me happy? What kind of life do I want to build for myself? For some, this leads to spiritual exploration. Meditation, mindfulness, and personal development become part of daily life. For others, it may lead to psychological growth, learning about emotional intelligence, boundaries, and self-awareness. Regardless of the path, the common theme is the same. The focus shifts inward. Instead of searching for answers in another person, you begin searching within yourself. And this is often where the most profound transformation occurs. Because when you learn how to create peace inside your own life, the energy of the connection changes. You no longer feel incomplete without the other person. You no longer believe that happiness depends on whether the relationship returns. Instead, you develop a sense of wholeness that exists independently. Ironically, this inner stability is often the very thing that makes future reconnection possible. Not because you are trying to make it happen, but because the emotional patterns that once created conflict have softened. Both people have learned how to stand on their own. Both have faced life without leaning entirely on the connection. And through that independence, something new becomes possible. A meeting that is no longer driven by need, fear, or emotional turbulence.
But by choice.
By maturity. By a deeper understanding of love. Yet even during these years of separation, there are often moments when the connection quietly reappears in unexpected ways. You might suddenly think about them after months of not remembering. You might dream about them during periods of major life change. Sometimes a random coincidence brings their memory back into your awareness. These moments do not necessarily mean reunion is near, but they often remind you of something important. Some connections leave an imprint on your life that never fully disappears. Not as a source of pain, but as a reminder of how deeply two people once recognized each other. And perhaps the greatest mystery of the twin flame journey is that even when two people walk separate paths for many years, something unseen continues evolving beneath the surface. Life continues shaping both souls, preparing them in ways they cannot predict. So that if the day ever comes when they meet again, the encounter will not be between the same two individuals who once struggled with the intensity of the connection. It will be a meeting between two people who have lived entire lifetimes of growth since the last time they stood face to face. And when that moment finally arrives, the familiarity of the past will blend with the wisdom of the present, creating a reunion that feels both strangely familiar and completely new at the same time. After years of separation, countless life experiences, and the slow transformation of two individual lives, the moment of reunion often arrives in the most unexpected way. Rarely does it happen with dramatic preparation. There is usually no grand announcement, no warning that this moment is about to unfold. Instead, it often appears quietly in the middle of an ordinary day. Perhaps you are walking through a place you have visited many times before. A cafe filled with soft conversations, the quiet aisles of a bookstore, or a crowded street where strangers pass by without noticing each other. Nothing about the moment seems unusual, until suddenly something shifts. You feel it before you fully understand it. A subtle pull of attention. Your eyes move across the room, almost instinctively, and land on a familiar face. For a brief second, your mind struggles to process what it is seeing. Time seems to pause. Your heart recognizes them before your thoughts do. And then the realization settles in. It is them, your twin flame, the person who once shared a connection so powerful that it changed the course of your life. The person you have not seen for years. In that moment, something remarkable often happens. The distance of time suddenly feels irrelevant. All the years that passed between you collapse into a single instant of recognition. This is one of the most commonly described experiences when twin flames reconnect after a long separation. The sense of familiarity returns immediately. But it is not exactly the same familiarity that existed in the past. Before the separation, the connection may have been intense, overwhelming, sometimes even chaotic. Now, the recognition feels quieter, more grounded. It is less like a storm and more like a calm wave moving through your awareness. Your mind may still be surprised. You might think, I cannot believe this is happening. But deeper within you, there is something that feels strangely natural, as if this moment was always part of the larger story. Many people describe this feeling as returning home, not to a physical place, but to an emotional or energetic state that once felt deeply familiar. The eyes, the voice, the subtle presence of the other person all carry a signature that your soul remembers. Even if their appearance has changed, even if years have left their marks on both of you, something essential remains recognizable. And that recognition does not need explanations. It simply exists. But perhaps the most surprising part of this reunion is the emotional atmosphere that surrounds it. You might expect an overwhelming flood of emotions. After all, years of memories, unanswered questions, and personal growth lie between you. But very often, the first feeling is not emotional chaos. It is calm. There may be a gentle smile, a moment of quiet observation. Two people standing in front of each other, both aware that something meaningful is happening, but neither rushing to force it into words. In the past, conversations between twin flames may have been filled with urgency. There may have been a need to resolve every misunderstanding, to explain every emotion. But after years of personal growth, something changes. The silence itself can feel comfortable. Instead of desperately trying to hold on to the moment, both people may simply allow it to unfold naturally. This shift in energy is one of the clearest signs of emotional evolution. The connection is no longer driven by fear. It is no longer fueled by the anxiety of losing the other person. Instead, there is a quiet presence, a willingness to simply be there. Sometimes the conversation begins in the simplest way possible. A greeting, a small laugh about the unexpectedness of the encounter, questions about life, work, family. At first glance, the exchange may look completely ordinary to anyone watching from the outside. Two people catching up after a long time apart. But beneath the surface, something much deeper is happening. Both individuals are observing each other with a new awareness. You notice subtle differences. The way they speak may feel calmer. Their energy may feel more grounded. The person you once knew has clearly lived through many experiences since the last time you saw them. And as you talk, you begin realizing something else. They're noticing the same changes in you. The person standing before them is no longer the same individual they once left behind. Your perspective has evolved. Your emotional reactions have matured. The years apart have shaped both of you in ways that could never have happened if the relationship had continued exactly as it once was. In many cases, this realization brings a quiet sense of gratitude. Instead of focusing on the pain of the past, both people begin recognizing the value of the time apart. The separation allowed each of you to grow in ways that were necessary. It created space for healing, space for self-discovery, space for becoming individuals who could stand confidently in their own lives. And because of that growth, the connection that once felt overwhelming now feels more balanced. This does not mean the attraction or emotional depth has disappeared. On the contrary, many people report that the connection actually feels stronger after years of separation. But the nature of the connection has changed. Before, it may have felt like an intense gravitational pull that neither person could fully understand. Now, it feels more like a quiet alignment. Two people who once moved in chaotic emotional patterns now find themselves meeting from a place of stability. And that stability allows a different type of connection to emerge. Instead of reacting impulsively, both people can observe the moment with awareness. They can appreciate the reunion without immediately trying to define what it means. Because the truth is, no one can fully predict what will happen after such a meeting. Some reunions lead to renewed friendships. Others slowly evolve back into deeper partnerships. And sometimes the encounter simply provides closure that both people needed. But regardless of what path unfolds, the moment of reunion itself carries a powerful message. It shows that time does not necessarily erase meaningful connections. Years of separate experiences do not automatically dissolve the energetic recognition that once existed between two people. In fact, sometimes time refines it. It removes the layers of emotional turbulence that once surrounded the connection. It replaces youthful intensity with mature understanding. And in doing so, it allows two people to meet again not as the confused versions of themselves from the past, but as individuals who have grown through life's lessons. Yet there is still one important question that quietly emerges after the first moments of reunion. What does this meeting mean now? Is it simply a coincidence created by life's unpredictable paths? Or is it the beginning of a new chapter that neither of you could have imagined years ago? Because while the recognition between twin flames may return instantly, the relationship itself does not automatically return to what it once was. The past cannot simply be repeated. Both lives have moved forward. Both people have changed. And that is precisely what makes this moment so important. The reunion is not about recreating the old connection. It is about discovering what the connection can become now that both souls have grown. And that discovery begins with something very simple. Two people standing face to face again, realizing that despite everything life has brought into their separate worlds, the familiar spark of recognition still exists. Quiet, steady, and perhaps deeper than ever before. The first moments of reunion often carry a quiet sense of familiarity, a recognition that feels immediate and natural, as if the connection never truly disappeared. But once the initial surprise fades and the conversation begins to unfold, something even more profound starts to reveal itself. You begin to notice the changes. Not just small, surface-level differences, but deeper shifts in the way the other person carries themselves. The way they speak, the way they listen, the way they respond to situations that once might have created tension. At first, these changes may appear subtle. Perhaps their voice sounds calmer than you remember. Their words feel more thoughtful, less reactive. They pause before answering questions, choosing their responses carefully rather than reacting impulsively. And then you realize something important. This is not the same person you once knew. Yes, the essence of who they are still feels familiar. The unique energy that once created the connection is still there. But the version of them standing in front of you has clearly traveled a long journey since the last time your paths crossed. The same realization slowly begins to appear in their eyes as well.
They are noticing the same thing about you.
The person they once knew might have been more emotionally reactive, more uncertain, perhaps even more dependent on the connection itself. But now they see someone who has grown into their own life. Someone who has learned how to stand independently. This moment of mutual recognition can be surprisingly powerful, because it allows both people to see each other with fresh eyes, free from the expectations and emotional patterns that once shaped the relationship. In the past, the connection between twin flames often carries an intense emotional charge. That intensity can create beautiful moments of closeness, but it can also create conflict when unresolved wounds are triggered. Maybe one person once struggled with fear of abandonment. Maybe the other found the emotional intensity overwhelming and needed space. Those patterns are common in twin flame connections, especially when both individuals are still learning how to navigate their own emotional worlds. But time has a remarkable way of teaching lessons that no conversation could ever fully explain. Years of separate experiences slowly reshape how people see themselves and the world around them. Perhaps your twin flame went through challenges that forced them to develop resilience. Maybe they faced situations that taught them patience or humility. Maybe they experienced relationships that helped them understand the importance of communication and emotional responsibility. Life rarely teaches these lessons gently. More often, they come through moments of difficulty, through mistakes, through heartbreak, through situations where people are forced to confront parts of themselves they once avoided. But those experiences often become the very things that lead to growth. And when you meet again after many years, the evidence of that growth becomes visible in ways that words cannot fully capture. You might notice that the person who once avoided difficult conversations now speaks openly about their feelings. The person who once reacted defensively now listens with curiosity instead of judgment. The person who once ran from emotional vulnerability now appears more comfortable with honesty. These shifts may seem small at first glance, but they represent something significant. They show that life has shaped both of you into more aware versions of yourselves. And the same process has likely happened within you as well. When you reflect on who you were years ago, you may realize that your perspective on relationships has changed dramatically. The things that once seemed overwhelming may now feel manageable. The fears that once controlled your decisions may no longer have the same power over you. Perhaps you have learned the importance of boundaries. Perhaps you have discovered the value of emotional independence. Maybe you have realized that love does not require losing yourself in another person. These realizations often come gradually, through years of experience and self-reflection. And when two people who have gone through that process meet again, something interesting begins to happen. The dynamic of the connection changes. In the past, the relationship may have been driven by emotional reactions. One person might have chased the connection while the other felt the need to pull away. The intensity itself may have created instability. But now the energy feels different. Instead of reacting to each other's fears, both individuals can observe the moment with greater awareness. There is less pressure to prove anything, less need to control the direction of the relationship. Instead of asking, "Where is this going?" the focus becomes something much simpler. Who are we now? This question opens the door to a completely new type of connection. Because when you release the expectations of the past, you create space to explore what the relationship could become in the present. Some conversations during this stage may feel surprisingly honest. You might talk about the years apart, the lessons you both learned, the mistakes that shaped your growth. But these conversations often feel different from the emotional discussions you may have had in the past. Instead of trying to defend your actions or prove your perspective, both of you may simply share your experiences with openness. Not to change the past, but to understand it. And that understanding can bring an unexpected sense of peace. Because when you look back with the wisdom you have gained over the years, many of the events that once felt painful begin to make more sense. You may realize that the separation was not simply a tragic ending. It was part of a process that allowed both individuals to become who they are today. Without that time apart, the growth that occurred might never have happened. The relationship might have continued repeating the same emotional patterns. But the distance created an opportunity for transformation. And now, standing in front of each other again, both of you can see the results of that transformation. This realization often creates a new type of respect between twin flames. Not just romantic attraction, not just emotional connection, but genuine respect for the journey each person has traveled. You recognize the strength it took for them to grow through their experiences. They recognize the same strength within you. And this mutual respect becomes the foundation for a more balanced relationship. Because when two people admire each other's growth, the connection is no longer based on emotional dependency. It becomes a meeting between two individuals who have both learned how to live full lives on their own. Paradoxically, this independence often strengthens the connection rather than weakening it, because neither person is seeking completion through the other. Instead, they are choosing to share their lives from a place of wholeness. And this shift changes everything. The connection becomes calmer, more stable, more conscious. It no longer feels like something that controls your emotions. Instead, it feels like something that enriches your life. But this stage also introduces an important realization. Just because the connection still exists does not mean the relationship will automatically return to what it once was. Both of you have built lives during the years apart. New responsibilities, new goals, new identities. The question is no longer simply whether the connection still exists. The question becomes something deeper. Now that both of you have changed so much, what kind of relationship is possible between the people you have become? Because the truth is that reunion is not about returning to the past. It is about discovering whether two evolved individuals can create something new together. And that discovery is the beginning of the next phase of the journey. A phase where the connection is no longer defined by emotional intensity alone, but by the conscious choices both people make moving forward. When twin flames reconnect after many years apart, one of the most surprising changes is not simply how familiar the other person feels. It is how different the connection itself feels. At first, everything may seem similar to the past. The same sense of recognition, the same magnetic awareness when you are in the same space, the same feeling that conversations flow more naturally than with most people. But if you look closely, something has shifted at a deeper level. The connection is no longer driven by urgency. It is no longer fueled by the feeling that you must hold on to the other person or risk losing something essential. Instead, there is a quiet stability that did not exist before. This shift may seem subtle, but it represents one of the most important transformations in the twin flame journey. In the early stages of the connection, many twin flame relationships are built on a powerful emotional pull. That pull can feel exhilarating at first. It creates the sense that you have met someone who understands you on a level that few others ever have. Conversations feel effortless. Silences feel meaningful. You may feel as though the other person can see through the masks you wear in everyday life. But alongside that beauty often comes something else. A deep emotional intensity. Sometimes that intensity turns into dependency without either person realizing it. One person may begin to feel that their happiness depends on the presence of the other. The connection becomes central to their emotional world. When the other person pulls away, the absence feels devastating. On the other side, the intensity can feel overwhelming. Being someone's emotional center can create pressure, especially if that person has not yet learned how to manage their own emotional boundaries. This dynamic is often what leads to the separation phase in many twin flame journeys. Not because the connection is wrong, but because both individuals still need to learn something important. They need to discover how to be emotionally complete on their own. Years apart create the opportunity for that lesson to unfold. During separation, both people slowly learn how to build lives that do not revolve around the relationship. They develop their own identities. They learn how to make decisions based on their personal values and goals. They experience moments of happiness that have nothing to do with the connection itself. This process can feel difficult at first, but over time, it creates a profound transformation. You begin to realize that your sense of worth cannot depend on whether someone stays or leaves. Your peace cannot rely on another person's choices. True emotional stability comes from within. And when both individuals reach that understanding independently, something remarkable becomes possible. They can reconnect without falling back into the old patterns of emotional dependency. The connection still exists, but now it feels lighter, healthier, more balanced. Instead of needing the other person to fill an emotional void, both individuals simply enjoy the presence of someone who understands them deeply. This difference may reveal itself in small moments. Perhaps in the past, you felt anxious when they did not respond to a message quickly. Now you feel calm. You trust that communication will happen naturally when it needs to. Perhaps in the past, disagreements quickly turned into emotional storms. Now, conversations remain respectful even when perspectives differ. These shifts indicate that the foundation of the connection has changed. It is no longer based on emotional survival. It is based on conscious choice. Two people who have learned how to live independently are now choosing to connect again. This is what creates a deeper form of intimacy. Because real intimacy does not come from dependency. It comes from the ability to share your authentic self without fear. When you are no longer afraid of losing the other person, you become more honest. You speak more openly about your thoughts, your boundaries, your dreams. And the other person can do the same. The connection becomes a space where both individuals feel free to be themselves rather than trying to maintain a certain image. This kind of freedom often leads to deeper conversations than the relationship ever had in the past. You may begin talking about topics that once felt too vulnerable to discuss. Personal fears, life philosophies, the lessons each of you learned during the years apart. Instead of triggering conflict, these conversations now create understanding, because both of you have developed greater emotional maturity. Another important change often appears in how you experience time together. Before the separation, time with your twin flame may have felt intense, almost overwhelming. Every moment carried emotional significance. There may have been a constant sense that something important was happening. Now, the connection feels calmer. You may spend time together in simple ways. Talking over coffee, walking through a park, sharing stories about your lives. And even in those ordinary moments, there is a sense of depth that is difficult to explain. It is not the dramatic intensity of the past. It is something quieter, but often more meaningful, because the connection now exists within the context of two full lives. Both of you have built experiences that extend far beyond the relationship. And instead of consuming each other's worlds, you are simply allowing your worlds to overlap. This balance is what creates a sustainable connection. In the past, the relationship may have felt like an emotional storm that pulled both of you into its center. Now, it feels more like a steady current that flows alongside the rest of your lives. You still feel the connection strongly, but it no longer disrupts your sense of self. In fact, it often strengthens it. Because being around someone who truly sees you can encourage you to express parts of yourself that others might not fully understand. And when that expression is met with acceptance rather than expectation, the connection deepens naturally. However, this stage also introduces an important realization. Even though the connection has matured, both individuals must continue choosing how they want to engage with it. Nothing is automatic. Nothing is guaranteed. The past does not dictate the future. Instead, the relationship becomes a series of conscious decisions. Do we want to build something together now? Do our lives align in ways that allow a shared future? Are we willing to grow alongside each other rather than expecting the other person to remain the same? These questions may not be answered immediately, and that is perfectly natural, because one of the greatest signs of growth in a twin flame reunion is patience. Instead of rushing to define the relationship, both individuals allow it to evolve naturally. They observe how the connection feels in the present rather than trying to recreate what existed in the past. And often, that patience allows something beautiful to emerge. A partnership that is not built on emotional urgency. A connection that does not demand constant reassurance. But a relationship where two people stand side by side, not because they need each other to survive emotionally, but because they genuinely enjoy sharing their lives. And that shift from need to choice is what transforms the connection into something deeper than it has ever been before. Yet even with this new balance, another question quietly arises. If the connection is now healthier, calmer, and more conscious than it was in the past, what role will it play in the future? Because recognizing a deeper connection is only the beginning. The real journey lies in discovering how that connection fits into the lives both of you have built during the years apart. To truly understand what it feels like when twin flames reconnect after many years, it can be helpful to imagine a real-life story. Not a perfect fairy tale, not a dramatic Hollywood romance, but a quiet, human story about two people who once shared a powerful connection, separated when life became too complicated, and then met again after a decade of living completely different lives. Let's imagine their names are Daniel and Sophia. They first met when they were both in their early 20s. At that stage of life, everything felt new and full of possibility. They were both exploring who they were, what they wanted from the world, and what kind of future they hoped to create. When they met, the connection was immediate. From the first conversation, there was an unusual sense of familiarity. It felt as though they had known each other much longer than the few hours they had spent together. They talked late into the night about everything: dreams,
Fears.
philosophy, childhood memories. There was a natural openness between them that neither had experienced before. Friends noticed it too. People often commented on the way they seemed to understand each other without needing many explanations. But alongside that deep connection came something else: intensity. Both Daniel and Sophia were still learning how to navigate their emotions. Daniel was ambitious and driven, determined to build a successful career. But he also carried a quiet fear of vulnerability. Opening his heart completely felt risky. Sophia, on the other hand, was emotionally intuitive and deeply expressive. She valued connection and communication, but sometimes that emotional depth made her feel exposed when the other person did not respond in the same way. At first, these differences created excitement. But over time, they began creating tension. Daniel sometimes withdrew when emotions became overwhelming. Sophia sometimes tried to hold the connection closer when she sensed distance. Neither of them intended to hurt the other. But they were still young, still discovering themselves. Eventually, the relationship reached a point where the emotional intensity became too difficult to manage. Arguments became more frequent. Misunderstandings grew larger. Both of them began feeling exhausted by the constant emotional push and pull. And then one day, after a particularly painful conversation, they made the decision to go their separate ways. There was no dramatic betrayal, no sudden loss of love. Just two people who cared deeply for each other, but could not find a stable way to continue. The separation was painful for both of them. For a long time, neither of them truly understood why the relationship had ended the way it did. But life has a way of continuing, even when the heart is still processing the past. Over the next 10 years, Daniel and Sophia walked very different paths. Daniel focused intensely on his career. He moved to a different city and slowly built the professional life he had always dreamed about. His work demanded long hours, discipline, and constant problem-solving. Through those experiences, he developed patience and resilience. He also went through relationships that taught him difficult lessons about emotional availability. Some relationships ended because he still struggled with vulnerability. Others ended because he realized that connection without emotional depth was not enough. Slowly, he began learning how to open himself more honestly. Meanwhile, Sophia's journey unfolded in a different way. She pursued a career in counseling and spent years studying human behavior and emotional healing. Her work required her to listen deeply to the stories of others. People came to her carrying their fears, their grief, their unresolved pain. Through helping others understand their emotions, she began understanding her own more clearly. She realized that some of her past reactions had come from a fear of losing connection. She learned how to create healthy boundaries while still remaining compassionate. Her life was filled with meaningful work, friendships, and moments of self-discovery. And yet, every now and then, the memory of Daniel would quietly return. Not with the same painful intensity as before. Just a soft thought. A reminder of someone who once played an important role in her life. Daniel experienced something similar. From time to time, something would remind him of Sophia. A song, a place they once visited, a conversation about meaningful relationships. But neither of them expected their paths to cross again. 10 years is a long time. People move to new cities. They build different lives. The chances of meeting again often seem small. And yet, life sometimes arranges moments in ways no one could plan. One autumn afternoon, Sophia was visiting her hometown for a weekend conference. After the event ended, she decided to stop by a small cafe she used to visit during her university days. The place had not changed much. The same wooden tables, the same soft music playing in the background. She ordered a cup of coffee and sat near the window, enjoying the quiet moment after a busy day. A few minutes later, the door opened. A man walked in, scanning the room as if searching for a place to sit. For a brief moment, Sophia glanced up. And then she froze. Daniel. He had returned to the city for a business meeting and had chosen the same cafe almost randomly. For a second, neither of them moved. 10 years of separate lives suddenly existed within the same room. Their eyes met, and something unexpected happened. Instead of the overwhelming emotional rush they might have imagined years ago, the moment felt surprisingly calm. Daniel smiled first. A simple, genuine smile. He walked toward her table, slightly unsure but clearly curious. "Hi, Sophia." The sound of his voice felt both new and familiar at the same time. She smiled back. "Hi, Daniel." The conversation that followed was not dramatic. They talked about their careers, the cities they had lived in, the experiences that shaped their lives during the years apart. But beneath those ordinary topics, something deeper was unfolding. Both of them were quietly observing how much the other person had changed. Daniel noticed Sophia's calm presence, the way she listened carefully before responding, the confidence in her voice when she spoke about her work. Sophia noticed Daniel's openness, the way he spoke honestly about his past mistakes and the lessons he had learned. The man sitting across from her was not the same young man who once struggled to express his emotions. And the woman he was speaking to was not the same person who once feared losing the connection. They were two different people now. Two individuals shaped by a decade of growth. As the conversation continued, something remarkable became clear to both of them. The connection they once shared had not disappeared, but it had changed. The emotional chaos that once surrounded their relationship was gone. In its place was something quieter, a sense of mutual respect,
Curiosity.
and a gentle warmth that felt both familiar and new. Neither of them rushed to define what the meeting meant. There was no pressure to recreate the past. Instead, they simply enjoyed the rare moment of reconnecting after so many years. And as the afternoon sunlight slowly faded outside the cafe window, both Daniel and Sophia began realizing something important. Sometimes the purpose of separation is not to end a connection. Sometimes it is to give two people the time they need to become the individuals they were meant to be. Because when two lives cross again after such a long journey, the connection has the chance to evolve into something entirely different from what it once was. Not the intense, unstable relationship of the past, but the beginning of a new chapter that neither of them could have imagined 10 years earlier. When twin flames meet again after many years apart, the first realization is often the familiar connection that still exists between them. The second realization, however, is even more powerful. Everything feels different. At first, this difference may be difficult to explain. On the surface, it may look like two people simply reconnecting after a long time. They talk, share stories, and slowly become comfortable in each other's presence again. But beneath those ordinary interactions, something fundamental has changed. The energy between them is no longer chaotic. In the past, the connection may have been filled with emotional highs and lows. Conversations could swing from deep intimacy to painful misunderstandings. Moments of closeness might have been followed by sudden distance. This emotional turbulence is common in many twin flame connections during the early stages. When two people meet who mirror each other's deepest emotional patterns, the relationship can feel like standing in front of a mirror that reveals everything you have not yet healed. That mirror can be uncomfortable. It can trigger insecurities, fears, and unresolved wounds that both individuals may have carried for years. When those wounds surface, people often react instinctively. One person may try to hold the connection tightly, fearing that distance will mean loss. The other may feel overwhelmed and pull away, seeking space to regain emotional balance. This dynamic often leads to the well-known runner and chaser pattern. But when two twin flames meet again after years of separation, something surprising happens. That pattern no longer dominates the connection. The emotional reactions that once felt automatic begin to fade. Both individuals have lived through experiences that force them to understand themselves more deeply. They have faced their fears. They have made mistakes. They have learned lessons that could not be understood through theory alone. Life itself became the teacher. Because of this, the reunion often carries a very different emotional atmosphere. Instead of tension, there is calm. Instead of urgency, there is patience. Instead of trying to control the direction of the relationship, both people allow the moment to unfold naturally. This shift may first appear in the way they communicate. In the past, conversations may have been filled with assumptions. Each person may have tried to interpret the other's words based on their own fears or expectations. Now, communication feels more open. When something is unclear, they ask questions rather than jumping to conclusions. When emotions arise, they express them honestly rather than hiding them or reacting defensively. This new approach creates a sense of safety that may not have existed before. Both people feel free to share their thoughts without worrying that every disagreement will turn into conflict. Another major difference often appears in how they handle distance. In the past, physical or emotional distance may have triggered anxiety. If one person became busy with work or personal responsibilities, the other might have worried that the connection was fading. Now, the response is different. Both individuals understand that healthy relationships require space. They respect each other's personal lives, responsibilities, and boundaries. This does not weaken the connection. In fact, it often strengthens it. Because when two people allow each other the freedom to live fully, the time they spend together becomes more meaningful. There is also a noticeable shift in how they experience silence. In the past, silence may have felt uncomfortable. It might have created uncertainty about what the other person was thinking or feeling. Now, silence feels peaceful. They can sit together without the need to fill every moment with words. They can simply share the same space, feeling connected without constant conversation. This quiet comfort is one of the clearest signs that the relationship has matured. But perhaps the most profound difference lies in how both people see the connection itself. Years ago, they may have viewed the relationship as something that needed to happen immediately. There may have been pressure to define the future, to create plans, to understand exactly where the connection was going. Now, the perspective has shifted. Instead of forcing the relationship into a specific direction, both individuals recognize that meaningful connections evolve over time. They allow space for the relationship to grow naturally. This patience often creates a sense of emotional stability that was missing before. Because neither person is trying to control the outcome, there is less fear. They are simply exploring what the connection can become now that they have both changed. Another important difference is the level of respect that exists between them. In the past, emotional reactions may have overshadowed appreciation for the other person's individuality. Now both people recognize the journey the other has traveled. They respect the challenges each person faced during the years apart. They admire the growth that came from those experiences. This mutual respect creates a new foundation for the connection. It transforms the relationship from an emotional whirlwind into something more grounded, something that has the potential to last. But even with all these positive changes, the reunion still brings important questions. Because life did not pause during the years of separation. Both individuals built lives during that time. They developed careers. They formed new friendships. They created routines and responsibilities that shaped their daily existence. So the reunion is not simply about rediscovering the connection. It is about understanding how that connection fits into the present reality of two lives that have grown independently. This is where many twin flame reunions face their most meaningful challenge. The past cannot simply be recreated. The relationship must evolve into something new. And that requires honesty. Both people must be willing to acknowledge who they are now, what they want from life, and whether their paths can truly align. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes it takes time to discover. But the key difference is that neither person approaches the situation with desperation. They approach it with awareness. They understand that love alone is not enough to sustain a relationship. Compatibility, timing, and shared life direction also matter. And because both individuals have matured, They are able to explore these questions without losing the connection itself. They can appreciate the reunion without immediately demanding that it lead to a specific outcome. This perspective allows something rare and beautiful to develop. A relationship based on conscious choice rather than emotional impulse. Two people who once struggled with the intensity of their connection now meet from a place of balance. They are no longer trying to fill emotional voids. They are simply discovering whether the lives they have built can move forward together. And that discovery often becomes the most meaningful part of the reunion. Because when a connection survives years of distance, growth, and transformation, it has the potential to evolve into something far deeper than it was in the beginning. Not a relationship driven by emotional extremes, but a partnership built on understanding, patience, and mutual growth. And that raises one final question. If two twin flames meet again after so many years and realize that the connection has become calmer, wiser, and more balanced, what does that mean for the future? Because recognizing how different the reunion feels is only the beginning. The real journey lies in discovering where this new version of the connection will lead next. When twin flames meet again after many years apart, the moment itself can feel almost magical. There is recognition, familiarity, and a quiet sense that something meaningful has just happened. But once the first wave of emotion settles, something else begins to appear. Questions. Not the desperate questions that often arise during the painful stage of separation. Those questions usually come from confusion and longing. Why did this happen? Did they ever truly care? Will we ever see each other again? After reunion, the questions feel different. They are calmer, more reflective, more thoughtful, because now the focus is not on the past anymore. The focus is on the present and the future. When two people reconnect after years of living separate lives, they inevitably begin to wonder what this meeting means. Is it simply a coincidence? A brief moment of closure? Or is it the beginning of a new chapter that neither of them expected? One of the first questions that quietly arises is this: why did life bring us back together now? This question does not necessarily come with a clear answer, but the timing of reunion often feels significant. Years earlier, the connection may have been too intense to sustain. Both individuals were still learning who they were, still reacting to fears and emotional patterns that shaped their decisions. Now, after time and experience have changed them, the connection feels different.
Calmer.
More balanced. Less driven by emotional urgency. Because of that, both people may begin wondering whether the reunion happened at a moment when they are finally ready to understand each other in a deeper way. But another question often appears soon after. Are we the same people who once shared that connection? The answer almost always is no. Time changes people in ways that are both visible and invisible. During the years apart, each person has lived experiences that shaped their beliefs, their priorities, and their understanding of relationships. Perhaps one person built a career that requires constant travel. Perhaps the other developed a life rooted in a particular place or community. Maybe both have responsibilities now that did not exist before, family commitments, professional obligations, or personal goals that define their daily lives. These changes create an important realization. The connection that once existed cannot simply return in exactly the same form. The past belongs to who they were then. The present belongs to who they are now. And that leads to one of the most meaningful questions in the entire twin flame journey. Can the people we have become create something new together? This question shifts the focus away from nostalgia. Instead of trying to recreate the relationship as it once was, both individuals begin exploring what kind of relationship is possible now. This exploration requires honesty. Both people must be willing to share their current realities, their goals, their priorities, their vision for the future. In some cases, these conversations reveal a surprising level of alignment. Despite the years apart, both individuals may have developed similar values. They may find that their life directions complement each other more naturally than before. In other cases, the conversations reveal differences that need to be acknowledged. Perhaps their careers require them to live in different places. Perhaps their lifestyles have evolved in ways that make a shared future more complex. But the key difference from the past is how these conversations are approached. Before the separation, such discussions might have triggered emotional reactions. Fear of losing the connection might have created pressure to force everything into alignment immediately. Now, the perspective is different. Both individuals understand that meaningful relationships require more than emotional intensity. They require compatibility, communication, and shared direction. And because both people have matured, they can explore these questions without losing respect for each other or the connection itself. Another important question often arises during this stage. What role does this connection play in our lives now? This question can feel particularly challenging because the answer is not always obvious. Some reunions gradually evolve into romantic partnerships again. Others develop into deep friendships that carry the same sense of understanding, but without romantic expectations. And sometimes the reunion serves a completely different purpose. It provides closure, a chance for both people to see how much they have grown, to release any lingering misunderstandings, and to move forward with peace. But regardless of the outcome, the reunion itself often carries a powerful message. It shows that the connection between two people can survive years of distance and change. It reminds both individuals that the relationship played an important role in shaping who they became. And it offers the opportunity to see the past from a place of wisdom rather than pain. Another question that quietly emerges during this stage is deeply personal. How do I feel when I am with this person now? Not how you felt years ago, not how the connection used to affect you, but how it feels in the present moment. Do you feel calm in their presence? Do you feel respected and understood? Do your conversations leave you feeling inspired or drained? These observations become important because they reveal whether the connection has evolved into something healthy and balanced. Twin flame reunions are often romanticized as destined events that automatically lead to lifelong partnerships. But in reality, every relationship still requires conscious choices. Two people must decide whether they want to invest their time, energy, and emotional presence in building something together. The difference now is that those decisions can be made with greater awareness. Both individuals have lived long enough to understand that love alone is not enough to sustain a relationship. Shared values, mutual respect, and emotional stability are equally important. Because of this understanding, the questions that arise after a reunion are not obstacles. They are opportunities. Opportunities to build a connection that is stronger than the one that existed before. A relationship that is no longer based on emotional reactions, but on conscious partnership. At the same time, both people must accept one final truth. Not every meaningful connection is meant to follow the same path. Sometimes the purpose of reunion is not to restart the relationship, but to complete the story in a peaceful way. And that possibility does not diminish the significance of the connection. In fact, it often highlights the deeper purpose of the twin flame journey. Because the true impact of such a connection is not measured only by whether two people stay together forever. It is measured by how much they grow because of it, the lessons they learn, the emotional maturity they develop, the deeper understanding of love and self-awareness they carry into the rest of their lives. And when two people can look at each other after years apart and recognize how much they have both evolved, that realization itself becomes incredibly meaningful. It shows that the connection was never simply about romance. It was about transformation. Yet, even after all these questions have been explored, one final realization begins to emerge. The reunion itself may have answered something far more important than any question. Because when two people who once shared such a powerful bond can meet again after many years and feel peace instead of pain, respect instead of resentment, and curiosity instead of fear, it becomes clear that the journey has already changed them in profound ways. And that realization prepares them for the final step of the story, understanding what the reunion truly means, not just for the connection but for the future of their lives. Viết chi tiết chung 10 bằng tiếng Anh, viết dài hơn khoảng 1.000 từ. Chapter 10, A Love That Has Evolved. For many people on the twin flame path, the idea of reunion carries a hidden expectation that once the two souls meet again, everything will finally be perfect. No more confusion, no more distance, no more pain. But those who truly walk this journey eventually discover something deeper. Twin flame reunion is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a different kind of relationship, one built not on illusion but on evolution. Because when twin flames meet again after years apart, the love between them does not simply return. It transforms. Love that is no longer possessive. In the early stages of the twin flame journey, love can feel overwhelming. Intense attraction, deep emotional dependency, a desire to hold on tightly to the other person. Many people mistake this intensity for unconditional love. But in truth, much of that early attachment is rooted in fear. Fear of losing the connection. Fear that the other person might leave. Fear that the love might disappear. This is why so many twin flame relationships go through the runner and chaser phase. One person runs because the connection feels too intense. The other chases because the thought of losing it feels unbearable. But time has a powerful way of transforming both souls. Years apart often force each person to confront their own wounds. The abandonment fears. The need for validation. The urge to control love instead of experiencing it. And when twin flames reunite after this long period of growth, something subtle but profound is changed. The love is still strong, but it is no longer possessive. There is no longer the same need to cling. Instead, there is space, freedom,
Respect.
they no longer try to own each other's presence. They simply honor it. The quiet confidence of mature love. One of the most beautiful signs of a matured twin flame connection is the calmness that replaces chaos. In the past, every interaction may have felt like an emotional roller coaster. A message could bring euphoria. Silence could bring anxiety. A small misunderstanding could turn into days of emotional turmoil. But after years of separation and healing, the dynamic shifts. Now, when they speak, there is patience. When they disagree, there is understanding. When silence appears, it is no longer threatening. Because both souls have learned something crucial during their time apart. They have learned to stand on their own. They have built lives that do not depend on the other person's presence to feel complete. And this independence, paradoxically, makes the connection stronger. Because now the relationship is no longer built on emotional survival. It is built on conscious choice. Every conversation becomes intentional. Every moment shared carries deeper meaning. They are not together because they need each other. They are together because they recognize the rare beauty of what they share. When two healed energies meet, healing is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming aware. Aware of one's patterns. Aware of one's fears. Aware of the ways we unknowingly hurt others. During the years of separation, twin flames often go through profound inner transformations. One may confront childhood wounds. The other may go through spiritual awakening. Both may experience relationships that teach difficult but necessary lessons. And slowly, piece by piece, the ego softens. The heart becomes more open. When these two evolved energies meet again, something remarkable happens. The connection feels lighter. There is less projection, less flame, less emotional chaos. Instead, there is curiosity, compassion, deep listening. Imagine two rivers that once flowed wildly and collided in turbulence. Over time, both rivers have widened and calmed. When they meet again, the merging becomes smooth, peaceful, powerful. This is what a mature twin flame reunion often feels like. Not explosive, but deeply harmonious. A new kind of partnership. In earlier stages of the journey, many twin flames focus only on romantic fulfillment. They imagine the reunion as the moment when their love story finally becomes complete. But once reunion actually happens, many discover something surprising. The connection begins to move beyond romance. Twin flames often feel a shared calling, a sense that their connection has a purpose larger than their personal happiness. Some begin working together in creative projects. Others support each other's spiritual growth. Some feel drawn to help others through teaching, healing, or sharing their experiences. The relationship becomes a platform for expansion. Instead of asking, "How can this person make me happy?" the question slowly transforms into, what can we create together? This shift is one of the most powerful transformations of the twin flame journey. Love evolves into partnership, and partnership evolves into purpose. The courage to love without fear. Perhaps the greatest transformation that happens after reunion is the disappearance of fear. In the past, both souls may have lived with constant uncertainty. Will this person stay? Will they leave again? Will the connection survive? But something changes after years of growth. Both people realize a powerful truth. Even if separation happens again, the connection itself cannot be destroyed, because it no longer exists only between two individuals. It exists within them. This realization creates an entirely new way of loving. They no longer love from fear. They love from presence, from gratitude, from awareness that every shared moment is a gift. And strangely, this fearless love becomes the strongest foundation a relationship can have. A story that never truly ends. The twin flame journey is often misunderstood as a fairy tale ending. Two souls meet, struggle, reunite, and live happily ever after. But the real beauty of this connection lies in something far more meaningful. Growth never stops. Even after reunion, both people continue evolving. New challenges appear. New lessons unfold. New layers of the soul reveal themselves. But now they walk the journey with awareness, with maturity, with compassion, and with a deep understanding that the purpose of their connection was never simply to find each other. It was to transform through each other. If you are currently walking the twin flame path, you may still be in the middle of separation. You may still be wondering if reunion will ever happen. But perhaps the more important question is this. If that reunion happened tomorrow, would you be ready for the kind of love it requires? A love without control, without attachment, without fear. Because twin flame union is not just about meeting again. It is about becoming the version of yourself who can truly receive that love. The deeper meaning of the journey. In the end, the twin flame journey is not simply about romance. It is about awakening. It pushes both souls to grow beyond ego, beyond fear, beyond the limited versions of themselves they once believed to be true. And when reunion finally happens, it reflects that transformation. Two people who once triggered each other's wounds now support each other's evolution. Two souls who once ran from the connection now walk beside it with courage. And perhaps that is the real meaning of twin flame union. Not finding the other half of yourself, but discovering your whole self and meeting another soul who has done the same. So if someone from your past reappears after years apart, and the connection still feels familiar, still feels meaningful, still feels alive, maybe it is not coincidence. Maybe it is two souls meeting again after doing the work they once avoided. And this time they are ready to love without fear, ready to grow together, ready to create something deeper than what once existed. If this message resonated with you, many people walking the twin flame path feel alone in their experiences. But you're not. Thousands of others are navigating the same mysterious journey of separation, healing, and reunion. So, if this story spoke to your heart, take a moment to share your experience. Have you ever reconnected with someone who felt instantly familiar after years apart? What changed between you? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you want to explore more insights about twin flames, spiritual awakening, and soul connections, make sure to subscribe and stay with this channel. Because sometimes the answers we are searching for are already waiting inside us. We simply need the courage to listen.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you.